Hello and welcome to the Stitch Together podcast. Today is the 7th of November 2014 and this is episode 8 and I am your host Chrissy. I'd like to say welcome back to all the people who have been following along with the podcast so far, and welcome to anybody who's giving me a chance for the first time, whether you found me on iTunes or on YouTube or through some other means. If somebody recommended the podcast to you, please let me know so I can say thank you, because I might not necessarily have seen their link back to the show. There's an awful lot of podcasts out there, and obviously I don't watch all of them. I watch a lot of them, listen to quite a few, but I don't necessarily watch every single episode of every single podcast. So even the ones that I really like watching or listening to, I don't necessarily get to every single episode, simply because there's only so many hours in the day and there's only so many days in the week. So just let me know. And also let me know if you've got any recommendations for other podcasts. There's a thread on the Ravelry group, which is Stitch Together Designs. And if you've got any recommendations for blogs or podcasts, please pop them in there so I can go and have a look. Also, if you yourself do a blog or podcast and you're not already on that thread, again, let me know so I can go and check you out. Or other people could go and check you out. So it's worth putting the link there. And I guess we should get started. First of all, stuff and things. There's not a lot to talk about. Basically, there's the random rummage craft along, which is going really well. There's been an awful lot of chatter in the chat thread, and we already have at least one thing in the made from yarn thread, and somebody's already sort of reserved a post in the made from fibre thread. They've not finished, but they just wanted to make sure they got a post kind of high up, and I think they're probably going to get their spinning done, because that's the same lady who'd already finished knitting. I think it was Pattern Whisperer, and that's pretty impressive. But one of the things that people are chatting about in the thread the most is that it's making them want to knit with their older yarn, which is exactly what I wanted to happen. Not necessarily just the yarn they've pulled out, but also just seeing other stuff when they're pulling out the random yarn or fibre, and it's reminding them of what they've actually got. Because even if you've got everything on Ravelry, you don't always remember everything, especially if you've been working with yarn and fibre for a long time. I mean, I've only been working with yarn for 6 years. Yeah, 6.5 years, and I've got a massive stash, simply because at the beginning I kind of bought everything that was a bargain. So I've not necessarily I've got quite a lot. My older stuff is kind of a bit more workhorse yarn, rather than fancy hand-dyed yarn, but I really need to get to it and get using it. I just want to mention my next door neighbour's cleaner comes round either on a Thursday or a Friday, and you can hear sort of swooshing noises as they sweep up and clean and things, because it's we're an end townhouse. It's kind of like a semi-detached. Essentially, we've got no one on one side and we've got neighbours on the other, and we've got the shared wall, and I think we've possibly got shared joists under the floorboards and under the ceilings. I think they're shared. I think they go through the walls, and you can sort of hear them moving around, and they can probably hear me talking to you right now, and it's probably very confusing because they're thinking nobody's talking back to Chrissy. But it's the cleaner, I don't care. It's not my actual neighbour. My actual neighbour knows I'm a bit mad anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But you might hear some strange noises, is what that all means. random rummage. Got sidetracked completely. So if you've got anything finished, go over to the Ravelry thread. If you've got any questions about any rules or guidelines, or any questions about how you choose your random yarn or fibre, come over to the Ravelry group. At the top of each of the threads is a list of rules, so you can double check there, and I recommend you check there before you ask a question in the thread, because it might already be answered and you won't have to wait for me to reply to your queries. So try that first. Sorry, I've just got to faff around my hair. I've got little tiny hairs growing in, you know how it does at the front, and they're sort of just about this long, and I can't tuck it behind my ears, and they keep making my nose itch, and it's driving me insane, so I do apologize. So yeah, links to the FO threads and the chat threads are over in the show notes, and as always, the show notes on the website, which is www.stitchtogether.co.uk, and if you select the podcast button at the menu bar across the top of the page, that'll take you through to the podcast section of the website, and it will have it always has the YouTube video embedded in with the show notes. So it's actually a really good way to subscribe to the podcast, is there's a little subscribe link on the page when you go through to the podcasts. So if you subscribe on that in a feed reader, then you will always know when a new podcast has been released, and you will get access to all the show notes as well. But even if you subscribe through iTunes or YouTube, you can click on the thing in YouTube and it'll take you to the show notes. So hopefully that will help. Oh, by the way, I forget, I'm currently wearing, I shall take it off so you can look at it, because this is actually a really pretty shawl. It's called Rainstorm Shawl, and it's by Giddy Davies, and it's knit in Baby Long Legs Perfection Sock, which is pure silk, and it's the Stingray colourway, and it's beaded, and it was a test knit that I did quite a while ago, and it's gorgeous, beautiful blue-grey colour, but it was quite a tricky knit, mainly because it was all those lovely sort of scallops you see across the top. They're mainly knit and purl into the back loop with increases and decreases. It took forever. It was kind of frustrating, even though it's the smaller section at the top. It just seemed to go on forever. So, but other than that, I absolutely love this shawl. It's got a beautiful weight to it. It's, along with, you know, with the silk and with the beads, it just feels amazing wrapped around your neck, and the beads help sort of keep it in place a bit. So, but it's a lovely shawl. It's really beautiful, and I can't straighten it up now. See, I shouldn't have done that. I should have talked about it at the end, but I just thought I'd mention that because someone's bound to go, what's she wearing? Because I do when I'm watching podcasts. I go, oh, that's nice. And the person doing the podcast knit it ages ago and didn't think to mention it because they talked about it when they knit it. So I thought I'd mention it. Some people remember, but you don't always, because you just take your knits for granted, don't you? Anyway, moving on to Done and Dusted. I've got sort of one properly done and dusted item and another one which is kind of a block away. So, as the Knitmore girls say. The first one, I've just undone this and I should have left it in its nice neat skein, is the Merino Tussar Silk in a one-of-a-kind colourway from Unwind Yarns, and I absolutely love it. It's about a DK weight, which is a really useful weight of a single skein, because you can, you know, make a cowl or a hat or some mitts with it, especially as I have, let me just, why am I looking it up? It's on my little tag. It's 213 meters, and I spun it worsted, and it's a 2-ply, and I just split it down the middle and spun sort of end to end one of the pieces, and then I split the second half into 2 again, and then spun it end to end, all in one strip to get it nicely barber poled. And it's really, really pretty. I really like it. It's really, again, it's another really sort of smooshy, bouncy skein of yarn, even though it's spun worsted, but it's obviously got, the merino's obviously got a really good crimp in it to make it nice and bouncy, and it's not particularly finely spun, which is more, I think, and believe me, don't take anything I'm saying as gospel, because I've not been spinning that long, and I've never been sort of taught how to spin. I've kind of just picked it up as I've gone along, but I have found that if you spin something worsted more finely, it seems to take a lot of the bounce out, just because there's less air in each particular ply, whereas if you're spinning a single ply or 2 fatter singles, then it tends to leave more air in it because you're not sort of stretching it out and compressing it as much. That's what I found anyway, and that is purely anecdotal from my experience, which isn't very long, so don't take my word for it. But yeah, really, really pleased with this, and I think it'll make an amazing hat or cowl, or again mittens, because it's lovely. I mean, the silk isn't obvious, it's only 20% silk, but it just gives it a little bit of extra smoothness, and it probably gives it a bit of strength as well. It's really lovely, and this is the first time I've spun anything from Unwind, and I would not hesitate to do it again because it is lovely, lovely stuff. It was a really pleasant experience spinning it. I really enjoyed it. So that's my properly done and dusted, because that's been washed. Well, basically it was soaked, and then I gave it a couple of snaps with my hands between the ends of the skein and sort of moved it around, just kind of evened it out a bit, you know, because when you soak it, kind of all relaxes, and all the sort of twists and turns kind of just sort of let go. And then when you sort of gently squeeze out the water, when you snap it back, it kind of lets it all kind of get into line and even out the tension. And just snapping it rather than thwacking it means you will get less fuzz. I tend to only thwack it when it's a woolen spun yarn. If it's a worsted spun, and the whole point of doing worsted is to make it nice and smooth, I don't want to whack it and make it floof up and release some of the fibre ends. I want them all to stay nicely contained within the yarn itself, so I tend to just pop it gently and then hang it up to dry, and that's that nice DK yarn. And the other thing, which is a block away, and because it's a block away it's not got all the ends cut, is the hat I was knitting for my niece, which is the Alternato hat by Woolly Wormhead, and it is knit in the Milla Mia naturally soft merino, and that's a sport weight yarn, and it's the petal, which is the pale pink, and the fuchsia, which is the dark pink. And the ribbing bit is done, it's a twisted rib, and I really like the way twisted rib looks. It's a bit of a pain, but it's not a very big hat, so, and it's got lovely sort of neat cast on edges because you use the alternating cast on, and it's kind of slouchy and poofy, and then it goes in quite quickly at the top with the decreases. So it should be nice, and when it's blocked, it won't be as wrinkly as that. It'll sort of relax a bit and push the body of the yarn out, the body of the hat out, and hopefully stretch that a bit and just give nice little pleats on the top. But I actually frogged it back from what you saw last time, because I felt that the knitting in reverse stockingette was looking a bit messy and a bit loose. So what I did was I frogged it back to the ribbing, and I turned the hat inside out, and I started knitting it as stockinette. I sort of did a kind of wrap and turn thing at the beginning of the row and picked it up on the way back, and you can't, it's a little bit loose, but sort of there. Don't know if you can see that properly. It's a little bit loose there. And what I'll do is that'll get tightened up when or evened out when I block it. And that meant that the gauge evened up, it tightened up, and it became a less sort of, I don't know what the word is, kind of sloppy, I guess. So that's nice and smooth and tight, which means there'll be less wind coming in through the stitches. And again, it was twisted rib in these bits here, and it was a really quick knit, because like I say, it was about there, and then I decided that I was going to rip it. It was about there, and I decided to rip it right back and knit the whole thing again. And I've done that during the course of the week, and it didn't take much at all. I really like the design. You know, I might make one for myself. I think it's cute. I think it's a sweet little slouchy hat, and I think my niece will really like it. But like I say, that does need blocking, because the pearl side is showing. It just needs a little bit of neatening up before it can be gifted, especially because of that sort of puckered bit on the top. So I need to decide what hat I'm going to do for my nephew, because he needs one too. I think it's going to be the Bali hat, and it's probably going to be in Cascade 220 Superwash, because that's a really good sort of workhorse yarn for giving to kids, I think. But that's all I've got that's done and dusted. So nose to the grindstone. The first thing I'm going to show you is the Walt painted chevron baby blanket. I always have to sort of think about that before I say anything. And this is where the little doohickey was. I moved it along after the episode, and this is how much I've knit so far this week since the last episode, all the way up to here. And I would have gotten further, but I ran out of the green yarn, so I had to order another skein, which held me up for a couple of days. I thought I had 2 full skeins, and I didn't. I had 2 and a bit skeins of the green, 1 and a bit skeins of the green, so I had to get another one. And I discovered, I mean, I don't know why I didn't discover this earlier, because it was blatantly obvious, I just wasn't looking properly, that my chevrons were all out of whack. If you look here, this chevron comes lower down than that chevron. If you see, can you see that? And it means that the increases and the decreases don't line up. Some of them, of each section, are thinner than others, and the 2 ends don't mirror, because it looks much smaller and more even at that side, and much more dropped and thicker on that side. And I only just noticed this about an hour and a half ago. And I was like, why have I not noticed this? What has prevented me from noticing this? And I can't tell you. Honestly, can't tell you why. I was just blindly going on. It's probably because I'd stopped thinking about it. I was just following the pattern that was set, and something obviously went wrong quite early on and I didn't pick it up. So I'm not ripping it back, because the only people who are going to notice it is me, because I spotted it, and you, because I told you about it. The people who get it won't see it. Most of the people who see the blanket wrapped around the baby won't see it. So I'm not ripping it back. But what I did do is sort of either dropped increases back or knit two together on both sides to sort of decrease, and added extra knit through the back, knit front and back on two sides, and got it so it's all even all the way across. And there's a few places, like for instance, I don't know if you can see that, where it's a bit gapy, where I've dropped stuff back. Yeah, you can probably see it a bit better there. So it'll block out. I'll just give it a bit of a tug before I wash it and sort of neaten it up a bit. But I thought I'd better do that so the ends kind of mirrored each other. And I don't think it hasn't really affected the way the chevrons look that much at all. So I think it'll be fine. Sorry about that. That wasn't post at the door. It was somebody trying to sell me doors, windows and fascias and gutterings. I've got a little tip for you. You know those salespeople that want to do things for your house? When they come to the door, say you rent it, even if you don't, and then they just go away. You don't have to argue with them or anything, because they can't sell it to you because you're a renter. So that's my tip of the day. Always works. Where was I? Yes, the baby blanket. I was talking about how many chevrons I have left to do. I've just got another 2 repeats of the green sections, and then a little bit of the end white, and then cast off, and then that will be done. I mean, it's a really good size. It's going to be a really good size baby blanket when it's done. That's a really interesting shot for you, isn't it? Do apologise. But yeah, it'll be good to get that finished and blocked and sort of packed up and put away for when the baby's born. Or I might give it to them sort of just before the due date, because I believe they're having a cesarean, so they know the date that they should be going in to have the cesarean. So if I give it to them before then, and then they'll have a blanket in the hospital. So I might do that. So that's the first thing that I've been working on. The second thing I've been working on is my socks, which are skewered. Got my first finished one, and the second one, when you saw last week, I just finished the toe, and now I am up to the heel, and I'm just doing the heel turn. I sort of was working on that at my knitting group yesterday. I do the Fish Lips Kiss heel, which I generally don't have to worry about doing. I can kind of do it automatically. Sadly, that wasn't the case last night, because I kept stopping and starting while I was talking, and I messed it up. So I'm going to have to rip that back. So I've had a bit of a problematic knitting week, really. Wasn't really being that successful. I mean, everything's gone wrong so far, hasn't it? The yarn is Regia Design Line ombre stripes, and let's see if I can find, no, It's in the show notes, is the link to the project page. And to be honest, I'll show you it again next week. Either there'll be more progress or it'll be finished. But they're kind of hand knit socks that I like to have some of because I can swing them in the machine and wash them, which means I have hand knit socks to wear even when I've got a mountain of hand washing to do, because they'll just go into the normal wash. So I like to do some kind of socks every now and again in stuff that can be machine washed. And even if the sock yarn says it can be hand washed, says it can be, it's a super wash, even if it's hand. My brain is not working. If a hand dyed sock yarn says it's superwash, I'll still hand wash it, simply because I want it to last as long as possible. And if I hand wash it, I'm not rubbing vigorously and making it fuzz up and damaging the sort of the fibres of the sock yarn. And I think it's probably because it's a real treat for me to buy a beautiful hand-dyed yarn and put it on my feet, and I want to do as much as I possibly can to preserve that unique piece of artwork that a dyer has created, and that's why I do it. It would be nice, it's nice to have superwash just in case they accidentally get in with the wash and they can go through the machine, no harm, no foul. But I like to extend the life of them as much as possible by hand washing them, especially with the merino sock yarn, because that obviously is a softer yarn than, say, a BFL, which is probably going to be more hard wearing. So that's the sock knitting that I've been doing. I've also done some more spinning on the John Arbon Alpaca Supreme, and it doesn't look much different to what I showed you last episode, so I'm not going to show you it again. It's, you know, it's grey, silver, spinning. It's not much different from what I showed you last time or the time before. But I did do, I sort of spent a couple of afternoons working on that, and I kind of enjoyed that. It was nice, fun, simple, pleasurable spinning with fibres I really like. The other spinning I started was because I finished the Unwind spinning. I pulled out a treat for my brand new spindle, and I'll talk about it now instead of in splashed out. The fibre I am spinning with is beautiful. It is Merino Tencel 50/50, and it's by Artist Palette, and the colourway is called Loose Change, and it's so beautiful and silky and soft, and the colour is gorgeous. It's beautiful warm neutrals, and I've never spun with Tencel before, and I was a bit scary. And it's working out fine, and I think that is because I'm a more competent spinner than I used to be, and the other reason is probably because of the spindle. Isn't it pretty? This is a Spanish Peacock bead wall spindle. It's a maple shaft, and it is birch wall, and I think it's about 12 inches in length, and it's only 19 grams, and it spins so fast, really fast. I think it's the fastest spinning spindle that I have, and it's got beautiful balance, as all Spanish Peacock spindles do. This is the first Spanish Peacock spindle I've been able to buy from the online shop. My other Spanish Peacock spindle was bought for me at a show, by the lovely, lovely Emily from Fibre Town podcast. She very, very kindly offered to get one for me and ship it, because I was incredibly jealous of her spindles that she got, and I'm never able to pick up on updates because they happen in the middle of the night. So I'm going to give you a little tip here. After a big fibre festival, there tend to be more spindles that go up onto the shop, simply because they've been holding them back before the festival, and after the festival they get back and they put them on the shop because they've not sold. So it tends to be a bit random what you get, but there are more to choose. In fact, it's the only time I've ever been able to get spindle from Spanish Peacock, and I check it out a lot because I love my Spanish Peacock Tibetan. And then when I saw this, the beadwall spindle, I just bought it without thinking about it, and it was only about 3 weeks after I got the Neil Brand one for the same reason, because I saw it and I had to have it, because you never see them. And I'd sort of seen a lot of other podcasters spinning on these and said how fast they were and how lovely they were to use to spin, and I just went, want that. It's beautiful. And there were about four or five different spindles to choose from, which is unheard of. You know, normally they go up and they go like that, but I was so pleased to get it. I mean, it's beautiful colours, the sort of the blue and the silver. It's exactly the sort of thing I love. But it's so fine. Look how beautifully fine that's spinning. Is that focusing? It's really hard to tell. I don't think it is. Anyway, if it's not focusing, I apologise for making you look at fuzziness. There's a link on the show notes and you can go and have a look at the photos I've taken so you'll be able to see. But basically, yeah, it's fine. I'm spinning it worsted, and I'm trying not to put too much twist in it because I want to keep it nice and soft, but having to put enough twist in it to keep it intact, you know, so it doesn't just drift apart. I'm sort of wondering whether I should just keep it as a single. I don't know, because I've loosely spun it, it shouldn't sort of bias too much. And I've never actually spun a single ply yarn. I've always plied it into sort of 2 or 3 plies, but I think I might be able to get away with leaving this as a single. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm sort of wondering. I'll see how it is when I wind it off into a plying board, because obviously I'll get to a certain point where I need to free up my spindle again. But I have to say, it's such a joy to spin on this spindle, and spin this fibre on this spindle is wonderful. I cannot tell you how good Spanish Peacock spindles are. They're just fantastic. And I think I sort of reached the stage now where if I buy another spindle, it will be because it fits a specific hole in my collection. I'm sort of particularly looking for something a bit heavier, because most of my spindles are in the 30-ish grams range, so between 30 and 40 grams. This is very light for me. I'm not used to this kind of lightness. So I might possibly, if I saw another one that was a similar kind of weight, I might buy something a bit on the lighter edge of things. But what I'd really like is something that's more like 45-50 gram range to ply with, or to do big fat singles. I'd really like to do that. And most of the spindles I've got are a bit too light for that. They tend to spin too quickly. So yeah, I've been carrying on looking at all my favourite spindle websites, and I've just been closing them down when there's nothing that fits my criteria, which I didn't used to do. It was like, oh, they've got a spindle and it's beautiful and I want it. I've been doing that, but now I think I've reached the point where I want to be a bit more responsible about how I'm spending my money and whether a spindle actually fits a specific need or not. But I have to say, I'm very intrigued by the thought of those 3D printed spindles. Have you seen those? The Turkish 3D printed spindles, and they're really quite cheap. I think I saw one for about £10 on Etsy. I cannot for the life of me remember what the name of it was. I'll have a look and I'll see if I can put something in the show notes. But I've never used a Turkish spindle because I find it hard to sit upright and hold my arms up for long periods of time. So I can't really do that. But if it's one of these little tiny Turkish spindles, I'm kind of tempted, especially if it's only about £10, to give it a go and see if I can physically manage it or not, because I do love those little turtles that people make around the bottoms of the Turkish spindles. They look so cute, and it would be nice to spin in a different way. I think that would be fun. So that is all I've got for Nose to the Grindstone. So I guess we're going to move to Splashed Out. So first off, I want to show you some fibre that I bought. This is from Fondant Fibre, and the reason I bought it was because I've been looking out for some fibre that I can spin to make into socks. They don't seem to appear very often because I want merino with some nylon or BFL with some nylon, just to give it that strength, because I just love the hand spun socks I've got. I just love them. They're brilliant, and I really want another pair. And I saw some on Fondant Fibre's update last week, and I went and had a look, and the one I really fell in love with was kind of surprising to me. It's this one. It's called Campfire, and it's these amazing sort of russety colours, basically like campfire, with this sort of coaly colours in dark browns and a bit of grey, and it's beautiful, really gorgeous. And it's 120 grams, and it's, I think, 75% merino, 25% nylon. It's hard to say because the tag is wrong. You see that? It's for fingering weight. It's giving me a sock weight thing. Luckily, the actual fibre is still up on the website, so I've put the right amount into my Ravelry page. But 120 grams should be enough to make a decent pair of socks. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that. It's taken me a while to find some, but when I saw that, I was really pleased, especially because it's a bit different colour for me, sort of more russety browns and reds and oranges. I kind of like that. I think it'd be interesting to spin anyway. But obviously, because I was buying something, and I think it was only like £8, and I thought, well, you know, to justify the postage, I'll have to buy another bag. So I bought another bag. It's little owls. Can you see the little owls? Kind of patchworky in nature. Really like little owls. It's really nice, sort of navy blue bottom section, and there's as always, there's a really cute zipper pull, little owly thing to match the fabric, and it's just a neutral cream lining, and it's interfaced. It's really sturdy, it's really solid, and it came as a set. A big one and a little one. So this is a really good size for socks, or for maybe a shawl, a 2-skein project perhaps. And it's so cute, really like it. It's a good size. And for the 2 bags was £18. I mean, that's crazy pricing. Cannot recommend these bags highly enough. They're pretty much the only bags I kind of use now. because they're really well made, they're really sturdy, nice fabrics, and an amazing price. Sound like a saleswoman, don't I, for Deb? Beautiful work as always, Deb. Beautiful work. Sorry, I just kicked you. I do apologise. So, I also bought this week something a bit different for me. And I bought it on a recommendation from my friend Sarah, who has a blog, really good blog, which is Crafts on the Cwtch, which is a Welsh word. And I'm not going to give you the direct translation because I can't remember what it is, but it's kind of like a snug, cozy hug kind of thing. It's a space in a house, I think, like a sort of snug, cozy place, like a knitting chair or, you know, a nook to curl up in and read. And she designed a shawl, a colour block shawl, in a yarn that I have never ever felt, never ever used, and I just went completely off her recommendation for this yarn. And she recommended it a while ago, and she started knitting a shawl a while ago, and the actual finished shawl just looked amazing. See if I can find it for you. The shawl is, the pattern's being written up as we speak. It should be going on the blog next week sometime, and it's going to be a free pattern. And this is the shawl, and it's a big, huge shawl. You know how much I like those. And the yarn it's knit with is, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but that is the yarn. I think it's no, not going to try. Anyway, this is a yarn that I think it's a bulky weight, and it's 70% cotton and 30% acrylic. And it's so, so soft. And of course, it's machine washable. And this is the stone washed version. There are other versions, and it's really loosely plied. I don't know if I can show you. Very loosely plied, but there's a lot of plies. And the colour is kind of fuzzy and sort of, all the colour is in this sort of fluffy fibre that's kind of wrapped around the solid plies, and I think the colour is probably the acrylic, and the sort of white strands is probably the cotton, and it's, you know, it's really strong and sturdy thing, but it's so soft. So I decided to do different colours because Sarah told me how many skeins of each block I would need. So I got 4 skeins in that colour, 2 skeins in this colour, and 1 skein each in these colours. And I think it's going to look really good. It's really hard to show at the moment. That's fairly true, because I've got artificial lights on because it's chucking it down. It's so grey and dark. So I've got all the lights on so that it's slightly yellowy tinged. The colour correction on the webcam's pretty good, but it's still not perfect. But there's a link to the yarn on the show notes, so you can go and see photos of the true colours. But the yarn is incredibly soft, and it's also pretty cheap. I got this from, where did I get it from? Darren Moore's, and they've actually got a sort of discount on this particular yarn at the moment. I don't know if it's still going to be there when you watch this, but I think it was like 10 or 15% off. But the price I paid with the discount was £2.54 a skein, which I think is pretty cheap. And it's lovely stuff. That because it's sort of stone washed, it gives it a lovely sort of heathery look. And Sarah was saying it's so cozy, her shawl. She's really pleased with it. So I'm going to make it with 4 colours of the green as my main colour, which in her photo is the coral colour. I think it's going to be really nice. I'm not doing it with fringe, I decided. I'm not a big fan of fringe because it's a faff, and I don't know, I prefer cleaner edges. I find fringes tend to get a bit grubby because they're sort of wafting around. And if it's wool, it felts. So I'm not a big fan. So that was £20 worth of yarn, and I should get a massive cuddly shawl out of that. So as soon as that pattern goes up, I'll probably start knitting that because it's nice and brainless. And I think it will be lovely and cozy and squishy because it's, like I say, it's bulky weight, so it's quite thick, and it's in garter stitch as well, so it's just going to be squishy and wonderful. So really pleased with that. I also bought, when I bought the single skein of the lime green Cascade 220 superwash for the baby blanket, I got 2 skeins of the same yarn in the piquant colourway. I really love this colour, this sort of russety brown, and I'm particularly thinking about making my nephew something out of this because I've got 2 skeins of it, so I might be able to get a little jumper out of it, because he looks really good in this colour. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sort of directly planning anything right now, but I might see how it goes after Christmas. Maybe a sort of in the depths of winter knit for him. But yeah, I got that from Wool Warehouse. It's reasonably cheap and it comes so fast as well. So I do recommend Wool Warehouse if you are in the UK. So a good place to get Cascade 220. The other splashed out that I've got is 2 skeins of Lady Persephone sock yarn from Countess Ablaze. And that blue is not quite right. So I'll put it against the white background. No, because it's not white enough. Anyway, this is the Persia colourway, this blue. It's one of Countess Ablaze's sort of standard colourways. Repeatable, that's the word I was looking for. And the Lady Persephone sock yarn is 75% BFL, 25% nylon. It's a fingering weight and it's 100 grams and 425 meters. And it's a lovely silky sock yarn. And I thought this would be rather lovely either as a shawl or as socks with a really interesting lace or cabled pattern, but it's beautiful. And the other one is Girl at the Rock Show, same yarn, different colourway. And this again is a repeatable colourway. Move that up a bit, you can see sort of yellows and greens into this beautiful pinky purpley red at the bottom. It's beautiful, and it's sort of about half the skein is white and undyed, and the other half is in this beautiful saturated colour, and I think it's going to be really interesting to knit. And again, I'm not sure what I'm going to knit with this, but I really love BFL bases, and these are both colourways that I've wanted to buy for a long time. So I thought I would treat myself. And Countess Blaze, I can't go wrong. Basically, I could buy anything from Countess Blaze and I'd probably be happy with it, because her colour sense is just my colour sense, essentially. It's basically. So, yeah, most of this podcast's been about me buying stuff. That's because I've not done much knitting this week. I've been really, really tired. I've been not sleeping very well. Basically, my pain levels have increased over the last couple of months, and that's meant I'm not sleeping. So I'm trying to decide if it is worth me going back to the doctor and seeing about either A, changing my meds again, which I'm really loath to do because it just puts me out of whack for months until I get used to them, or maybe going to see the consultant about having some surgery again, because I think I've got to the stage where it might need surgery again, and I'm really loath to do that because every time they do surgery, though it gets rid of the adhesions I've got, it increases the risk of adhesions in the future. It's kind of a catch-22 situation. So I try and put that off as long as possible, and I've done all right. I think the last surgery I had was end of 2011, beginning of 2012, possibly. Can't remember. I should look it up before I go back to the doctors. But yeah, I've just not been feeling great. I've been really tired. The change in the weather, it's got a lot colder very quickly. We've had a really mild autumn until now, and this week it suddenly got cold. I mean, yesterday I spent most of the day underneath a blanket and my new poncho, sort of shivering, and I just couldn't be bothered to knit, and I just sat and read all day. And I don't really do that because I would just read too many books if I did that. I've always been an avid reader, and I'd just like to say up front, I read purely for pleasure. I do not read for challenge. I do not read classic fiction. I'm terribly addicted to fantasy and science fiction and crime thrillers. And I'm not to say that they're not good quality and well written ones, but a lot of the stuff I read, other people go, you read what? It's, I started reading urban fantasy before it was a name, a genre. It's like, I loved those books and bought them out of the fantasy section for ages. And I remember the day when I walked into the bookshop and there was a whole section named urban fantasy, and I went, what's urban fantasy? And I went and had a look, pulled books off, and I went, oh, I've read this book, it's urban fantasy, that's the genre. And so I read an awful lot of that, a lot of sort of traditional fantasy and an awful lot of crime and thriller fiction. So pure escapist stuff. If I want to stretch my brain, I pick a really complex lace pattern or read a techniques book or watch a craftsy class. Most of the time I read because I'm not well enough to craft or to take in much. I tend to read sort of at 2 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep because of pain, because reading has always taken me away. So I couldn't manage anything challenging. My vocab's just gone poof because I'm tired, which is one of the reasons I'm thinking about going back to the doctor, because I don't function well when I'm tired. But yeah, it's pure escapism. I mean, when I was a kid, apparently my parents would have to sort of like stand and snap their fingers between me and my book. to get my attention if I was reading. They could be stood in front of me going, Chrissy, 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 for about 5 minutes, and I just wouldn't hear it because I'd be in this transported is the word I'm looking for. Transported into another world. I sort of become part of that world, and the real world kind of disappears. And that's one of the things I love about fantasy, is that it's so very, very obviously not real. And if things are difficult, they're difficult because it's unreal, rather than it being sort of everyday life challenges. You know, it's magic and dragons and blowing things up and staking vampires and stuff. So it allows me to leave sort of everyday life behind and be transported. So for about 2 days this week, I just lay on the sofa underneath the blanket and just read. And that meant I didn't craft, which is really unusual, because mostly I'll sit and knit on a sock or a hat or something very straightforward while I read, and I just wasn't in the frame of mind to do that. I just wanted to sit and read. So that's why I've not really achieved much this week, and seem to have bought lots. There's nothing different there really. So when I feel rubbish, I buy stuff. Got no money. Don't know how I'm going to afford Christmas, because I've said I'm not gift knitting this year. So I shall stop wittering on now. I do apologise for yakking as much as I always do. Oh God, completely forgot. Under online community this week, one of the members of the group, Quilter Caroline, has recently released a pattern. And the pattern is called Never Shall Meet. It's a shawl design, and she's released it under the name Clothesline Designs. And see if I can, there we go, can find it. And this is a shawl pattern. There we go. And it's sort of texture and lace, and I think it's on the bias, and it looks a lot of fun, and I think it's sort of designed so, yeah, there we go, so it'll work well with long striping yarn. I think it will be really fun with hand spun as well. So Caroline very kindly is giving away 2 of those patterns to 2 of you lucky people. Get 1 pattern each, by the way. And I shall open a thread in the Ravelry group, and if you go over to that Ravelry thread, if you go in and tell us what you would knit the pattern in, because there'll be a link to the pattern page and you can see what the yarn requirements are. It's 4-ply, I think, but there are 2 sizes. So because it's designed for 2 sizes, the smaller one will be probably more used to people who are spinning their yarn, and the larger one for people who've bought their yarn. So if you go over there and tell us what yarn you would use, you don't have to necessarily put links in or photos or anything, just tell us what those are, and in episode 10 I'll tell you who the winners are. And that, I think, today is everything. I do apologise if it was a bit scatty today. Like I say, I'm tired, and I wasn't sure I was going to record, but I felt like I should. I don't want to get out the habit of recording, because when I'm talking I really enjoy it, and I feel good for having spoken about things, and talking about things and pulling things out once a week really helps keep me focused and on track, and it, believe it or not, does make me think about the yarn I'm buying. I'm tending to buy stuff more for particular projects rather than just because it was pretty. I have to say, this was the exception. I just bought them because they were pretty. The other stuff is all because I have stuff in mind. So hopefully next week there'll be less stuff and more actual project work. But I hope you have a lovely weekend, a lovely week, and hopefully I will speak to you again this time next week. Thanks for spending time with me. Bye.